This week, as promised in our last episode, we're going to talk about this medium of radio that some people are saying is already on the verge of extinction. When I was your student at the Newhouse School of Public Communications in Syracuse, I took a course with you that was called radio production. And that course was really one of the most fun courses that I've ever taken, in the years that I studied at different universities. So, but now you do not teach that course, right? Because it's not under your name on the website of the university. Am I right?
So, yes and no. First of all, thank you. You were in the very first class, and that was a course that was developed. If we think back to our conversation last week about teaching and teachers and relationships, that was a course that was developed with a graduate student in your year, and who approached me and said, could we do something that's more creative with radio beyond just journalistic reporting? Because that's done very well at Newhouse in a number of departments. So I think, well, what a great idea, and responded. So you were a guinea pig in a way of what we could do. And so I've taught the course ever since, but I noticed that fewer and fewer people were signing up for it. And part of it was the dreaded R word, radio. And so I think for many students, they think of their grandmother with a transistor radio, listening to old style storytelling. So what I did was change the title of the course to audio storytelling, and the numbers went right back up. So what's in a name? Apparently everything. And the course did not change one bit apart from the title. It's still about sound-rich storytelling, writing for the ear, and looking at the medium from a creative standpoint of storytelling, and not just information delivery for advertising or for news reporting. So radio, despite all of the rumors, is alive and well and is as vibrant as ever, only now it's called podcasting. And really, the difference is just in the platform and method of delivery. But television didn't kill radio. Cable television didn't kill radio. Podcasting is just the next iteration. And whether you listen live over the radio or you're listening on your phone, it's still audio storytelling.
So you yourself did quite a bit of work for different radio stations all over the world. So apart from interviews, of course, I know that you are interviewed a lot by different radio journalists, but apart from that, and you interview also people too, but apart from that, what other kind of work you did and for whom?
Well, it was a great question because, I have been privileged to be interviewed and been on radio, and I love it. It wasn't necessarily a career goal, but certain doors opened for me, and they were mostly in Europe. And I can point specifically to two people who really gave me entree into a world of sound art through the medium of radio as a creative platform. The first was through Westdeutscher Rundfunk in Cologne, WDR, and a man named Klaus Schöning. And Klaus Schöning for years ran the studio Akustische Kunst, the sort of creative aspect. And this is a man who worked closely with John Cage and, the legacy of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, where the center in Cologne was a creative hub and center for activity. And he had heard some of my work, and I approached him, and we developed a wonderful relationship. And so he commissioned me on a number of occasions to develop radio art pieces that were aired across Germany and picked up by different stations in Berlin, Frankfurt. And one of them, I think that we worked really hard on, was a broadcast, a live satellite art piece from Antarctica, at Palmer Station on the Antarctic Peninsula. And this was supported by the National Science Foundation Antarctic Artists and Writers Program. It was my second trip down to Antarctica. And the piece involved creating instruments like wind harps and sort of sound installations, but also recording live from a penguin colony almost a kilometer away from my little studio in a laboratory at Palmer Station. So I just received tremendous support for this. And we were right at the edge of satellite connectivity using the technology that we had. And it worked. It was high risk, but it came out really beautifully. And was innovative in the sense that it was done live using, recordings that I had pre-recorded, but also a lot of live recordings, a hydrophone off. So you hear icebergs grinding and crunching against one another, a penguin colony, wind harps, and some narration that I derived from the writings of Ernest Shackleton, legendary Antarctic explorer. And we worked these all together. It was an hour-long broadcast on New Year's Day at 2000. So, and then Klaus Schoening commissioned me to do other pieces as well, related to the natural soundscape and how music intersects with that. So it really helped me, from a professional way, to think about radio as a creative medium. I mean, it's always creative. People are creating stories, but really as an artistic platform to engage listeners, live or pre-recorded. And the live aspect was exciting and almost equally terrifying. We're talking a few sessions ago about live performance as opposed to just studio work. And this brought together a bit of both, all of the thrill and uncertainty of a live performance, particularly with the technological aspects being reckoned. So there's that, and maybe we can have just a little listen to part of the satellite transmission that aired on West German radio on New Year's Day 2000.
Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail? Out of whose womb came the ice, and the hoary frost of heaven, who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen.
The other person that I think was singularly influential for me is Rene Farabe, who ran the Atelier de Création Radiophonique at Radio France. And he commissioned me to do a couple of pieces as well around soundscape and my wildlife recording. And here too, it was a creative endeavor, part documentary, part soundscape. And he was a very, very thoughtful in his questioning and the conversations that we had. So I'd look at both of those two opportunities coming out of a very strong European tradition of radio as a far more expansive platform than just an information and news delivery service. And so I think, the German tradition of Hörspiel, there's just a wide variety of expression and possibilities. It's not that they don't exist in the US, they just don't exist in the same way and with the same premium placed on artistic expression. You have individual stations. When I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's KPFA, the Pacifica radio station out there, which is legendary for experimental and innovative programming, and still is. And I did some work with them in the 90s, but their forays into more avant-garde thinking about soundscape and sound art really goes back to people like Charles Armacanian in the 70s. So there are pockets in the US where this exists, and I think, but I really look to Europe as having been a huge part of my creative life, particularly in the 90s. I haven't done much recently with it, but I look at podcasting as the inheritor of that. It's just now it's on demand as opposed to being live, or it can be both. But I think radio is anything but dead. And as a creative medium, my gosh, some of the best podcasts are some of the best stories and sound-rich storytelling that I've heard in a long time. It's almost come back full circle to the heyday of radio drama in the 1930s and 1940s. So I think it's an exciting time. It's just that the R word has been replaced by the P word.
So you mentioned soundscape. This is a particular genre, very interesting that I discovered in your class. So you did some soundscapes for a French radio station. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Radio France. Yep.
Can we listen to an excerpt? Or
Good. Okay, so we'll come back a little bit. And so this is just a little taste of a kind of protracted journey and foray into the forest, basically. The title of this was the forest in the studio, because we were talking a little bit about how I take the soundscape material and weave them in as a retelling through studio processing. This is just something for French radio that appeared on France Culture.
Right.
So very specifically there. And then, so these are more long form pieces. We were just having a little excerpt or a little taste. And I think there's something to be said for, the luxury, frankly, of engaging people for an hour of just listening. And I think you have to make every second count, as you do in short form production as well. So, yeah, so those are some examples of the longer form soundscape based. And I just want to take a moment. Soundscape is a concept and a word that was developed by the late composer R. Murray Schafer, who just passed away in mid-August of 2021. But his book, Soundscape, The Tuning of the World, has informed several generations of composers and sound artists, including me. So just an acknowledgement that the word has not always existed. It came from a very specific time and place and energy. And Murray Schafer's vision is far-reaching. So we can listen to one other little short excerpt from another piece, because I think one of the things about radio that excites me is that it's never one thing. So I've had the privilege of being able to integrate my work as a composer and as a sound artist into different media and different contexts, from museum exhibits to film to sort of fine arts settings to natural history museums. And it's the same with radio. So this is an example of a shorter piece for National Public Radio in the U.S. that focused very specifically on conservation efforts in New Zealand, a small island to the south of the South Island called Alva Island. And it's a refuge and haven for indigenous birds, because most of New Zealand, while it has some indigenous wildlife, over the years, a lot of that has really been, damaged, or many species have gone extinct because of introduced species like rats and cats and dogs and pigs. So very much a threat to bird life. But there's this one tiny island called Alva Island where I had the opportunity to do some recording of a dawn chorus. So let's have a listen to that, because the sounds there are very unique and are very much a reflection of what used to be New Zealand. So this is Alva Island.
Okay, great.
So that's just a taste of something that's more like an audio postcard. And the context for this isn't a deep listening hour long that you'd have at, Radio France or Video. It comes at the end of the news hour. All Things Considered is a very popular news broadcast. And this is a way to kind of take people out a little bit more gently with a human interest piece at the end of the news after the report of the daily carnage and, political and economic news. So I always look for different opportunities to help convey an environmental message without it necessarily being preachy, but to open people up to that sensory experience of the natural world as a way of connecting people and having them reconnect with really their own backyard or wherever it is they're going, wherever they're listening. So these opportunities are really important for reaching a large public, but also telling a story that goes beyond the damage human beings are doing to just shining a light on the other voices, with whom we share the planet.
As I said, I discovered the kind of this art of soundscapes through your class, because that was the first assignment we had to do for the radio production class. I really love that assignment, and I like to give that assignment to my students, and their first reaction is always, "What? Why? What are we supposed? What? No words? We're going to tell a story with no words? What is that?" So my question is kind of related to that reaction. What opportunities do you see for radio today, considering that people are relying more and more on their vision, and considering that there is this new boost of podcasting where people just, chat away about things, everything and nothing, So how do you see this medium could be used or could distinguish itself from everything what's going on now in entertainment and in the media today?
Boy, that's a big question. That's a very big question. So I think for me, it comes back that we're storytellers by nature, our species, human beings. And this just provides another avenue for that expression. I think there are a couple of factors at work here, too. As you said, there's a lot out there. And quite frankly, most of it's garbage. There are over 500,000 podcasts out there. And I'd say of that, 95 to 99% of them are not worth the time to listen to. However, those that are can be absolutely stunningly beautiful, creative, imaginative, informative. So I don't dismiss everything out there, but there's just almost too much, and it's hard to know, where to begin. And I think the beauty of that is that you can find the stuff you're interested in, but you're subscribing to something like Stitcher or something that acts as a feed for your favorite types of programming. So I think it's liberating that not everything now comes through radio stations and the sort of power that they held in past times, that really anyone can create a podcast. And it's up to the marketplace and up to your determination to figure out if it's going to have traction and reach people or not, And so for me, I think it's a wonderful creative platform, and a lot of people are getting into this. Younger generation are kind of rediscovering the joys of sound-rich storytelling and different ways of constructing a narrative based on the fact that it's on demand. You can do a series, you can do a one-off. It's such a flexible medium at this point, but it still relies on those core values that old school radio placed an emphasis on, which is really listening carefully to how you construct a good story from a narrative perspective, but also exploiting, in the best sense of the medium, opportunities for sound design with ambiances, sound effects, music, that all of these things can work together with the same richness and complexity of a film soundtrack, really. So I think it's an exciting time. And for those younger people coming up and into the medium, my gosh, what great opportunities exist. And there's some real talent out there. So my encouragement to all these listeners is find what you like, because there's no shortage. It's just often finding that needle or a piece of gold in the haystack, because there's just a lot of noise out there of just people babbling on, because they need the attention. But those who have something to say, what a great opportunity.
But the question is still, for me, why should we stay on radio waves? Because the internet provided us with opportunities to just tune in and listen to those wonderful stories online. Do we still need the radio waves? Do we still need to switch on our, as you say, transistor or or our radio in the car and listen to something that is created for that particular way of communication? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting question. With its technological advances and development, streaming and on demand, are becoming increasingly dominant, which is great because you have that flexibility. But I don't think that the live broadcast is going to disappear anytime soon. If you look at these statistics, and I don't have them in my head at the moment, but more people listen to radio, old school radio, than you think. Not everybody has high-speed broadband internet connection. When you think globally and go beyond Europe or North America or Asia, when you stretch across the globe to rural communities, people sometimes have hand-cranked generated radios that they can still pick up signals from, broadcast centers around the world. So I don't think it's going to disappear overnight. And I think that there's going to be value. They'll just overlap with the on-demand world that the internet is bringing and the streaming world. And as more and more of the globe gets connected, there may come a time when it will supplant, terrestrial radio over the air broadcast. But for the time being, I think there's a nice complementarity because you can listen with an old school receiver or listen in your car if you don't have a USB port to plug your phone in. To me, I think the important thing is that people will find a way to connect with each other regardless. And the technological platform shouldn't be confused with what lies at the core of it, which is we're storytellers by nature. And we'll always find a way to connect with one another. And the technology is interesting and intriguing because it opens up possibilities. But to argue that radio is going to be dead because terrestrial broadcast is this Jurassic lingering dinosaur of a past age is kind of missing the point, really.
Yeah, I think listening to you, what really kind of came to my mind was the fact that there are large communities that still rely on that terrestrial broadcast, that, as you said, do not have internet or they don't even like listening to the internet or the data is too expensive. I mean, the world is huge and there are different kinds of economic situations there. But I think what a great opportunity for creators to use then radio as a way to connect to those communities. That do not have any maybe other way of listening to artistic, interesting, rich audio storytelling, but the terrestrial broadcast. So I think it's a great opportunity to kind of serve those communities and work for them and with them.
I totally agree. I think it's just another avenue. It's the legacy avenue, if you will, at this point. But it's far from dead. I mean, eventually it'll pass, just as when radio came into being, it was this new medium, 100 years ago, really when it took off on a viable level to reach masses of people in the 20s and 30s. That I think of Vincent Benet's description of the theater of the mind that radio brought to people. And I think there's still plenty of opportunities, and we shouldn't get caught up on the technological aspects of it, but concentrate on the content. What is it we're saying since we have these tools?
I really like this metaphor of the theater of the mind, audio storytelling as a theater that you create in your mind while listening to the audio stories. And there's a big rise in audio drama or audio detective stories nowadays, where people tell, all those stories of suspense through sound, and you only listen to those. You do not watch it, on the screen. So the question is to you, if you were commissioned, if you were given money by a radio station for a new piece, what would it be? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, I think, it depends what someone asks me to do. Usually the invitations that I get are from people who have an idea of where my passions lie and expertise lie. And a lot of that has to do with the reckoning of the natural world of which we're very much a part. So, and the sort of origins of musical consciousness in the soundscape around us, that we're not the only ones who make sounds on the planet. So the works that I mostly get commissioned to do tend to focus on that area. Occasionally, someone will ask me to do something different, but that's really it. So I tend to kind of respond to, commissions. Sometimes they're very open-ended. What would you like to do? And it's like, well, how about this idea? How about this idea? And that's how the year 2000 in Antarctica came, is that I had done some work with Klaus Schoening in the past, and he had produced a couple of pieces. And we were just shooting ideas around one day. And I said, what I'd really love to do would be, it's high risk, but is to try and do a live sound art piece from Antarctica. And he thought for a couple of seconds, he said, wow, let's do it. And he figured out a way to make it happen. So I think for me, I'm always kind of open and, for things that both interest me and I find value in sharing with people. I'm probably not someone you would approach to create a murder mystery online. It's just not my cup of tea. I enjoy that stuff. But it's, so I think I have certain areas of focus. I also, again, think in terms sonically. So much of my life has been informed by music. So when I approach some of these creative projects online and think of sound art as something that can be delivered through the medium of radio or podcast, I come at it from more of a musical background than I do a journalistic background. So that informs a lot of the experience I'm trying to create for people, that it's informed by music, and for some it may be music, but it's about that edge. What is music? And how do we perceive the world around us? So yeah, that's sort of a kind of circuitous answer to your question. But I think we tend to seek each other out. People who are interested in commissioning me and the kind of work that I'm interested in exploring and sharing with people.
That's it. I think that's our 2 pence as far as radio is concerned as a medium, and but that's not it. You might think, we probably have covered everything there is to cover. In terms of working with sound and audio storytelling and audio art, but that is not it, ladies and gentlemen. We have something else to cover, a new kind of area or another different area of sound design and sound art. And we'll do that next week, and let it be a surprise.